Welcome. Hi, I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here.
Morning everyone, it's Mikki here. You are listening to Mikkipedia, and this week on the podcast I speak to returning guest Dr. Dan Plews, and such a fun conversation. We talk about his recent foray into an animal-based nutrition approach and how he found that with regards to his health, his performance, and any of the sort of other nuance and stuff that he experienced. We also talk about the importance of sodium for performance. We discuss our relative views on sweat testing and some of the problems that are associated with that. And we also talk about Dan's recommendations for those people headed into a hot summer of training, or Kona for Hawaii Ironman, or any event where it is likely to be warmer than what you are currently used to. So what do you do about your sodium in that respect? And then finally, we touch on his most recent research that talks about the importance of habitual dietary fat intake for fat metabolism as a whole. And this is outside of pre-training nutrition strategies. So this is a super interesting paper, very recently published, and new information. So as always with Dan, it's a fun conversation. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Dan, he is an applied sports scientist, researcher, coach, and competitive triathlete. As an applied sports scientist, Dan has worked closely with athletes who have won more than 25 world and Olympic titles in sports, including rowing, kayaking, and triathlon. Dan was part of Rowing New Zealand's preparations for both the 2012 and 2016 Olympic Games as a sports scientist. And he was also part of Team New Zealand's effort in America's Cup 2021. As a researcher, Dan has a PhD in exercise physiology with a particular interest in heart rate variability and over 30 peer-reviewed publications to his name. Dan has coached 3 professional Ironman triathletes to sub-8-hour times, including Terenzo Bozzoni, Jan van Berkel, and Tim van Berkel. Most recently, Dan has founded Enduro IQ, which is an online learning hub for anyone interested in optimal long course triathlon performance. And Dan can be found over at Enduro IQ, www.endureiq.com, and over on Instagram at The Plews, where he's super informative with lots of really helpful tips for health, performance, and longevity. Before we kick into the podcast though, just like to remind you the best way to support this podcast is to hit like and subscribe on your favourite podcast platform and leave a 5-star review. That way the visibility of Mikkipedia increases and more people are able to get the insights shared by some of the experts that I chat to on the show, and I just think that's of benefit for everyone. The other way you can support the podcast, peeps, is to head over to mickywilliden.com, where you can subscribe to my recipe portal access for $12 a month. Not much really. You get over 900 recipes regularly updated, access to pick my brain over anything nutrition related or health related, access to our members only Facebook page where we run written Q&As and you can get your questions answered there as well, or sign up to any number of my plans that I have available on my website for all of those benefits, plus a specific meal plan and shopping list for you. Alright team, please enjoy this conversation that I have with Dr. Dan Plews.
Dan, how are you? Good to have you back.
Yeah, good. I feel like, when you get in these close proximity video things and you look at yourself, I feel like I'm looking older. It's always a bit of a smack in the face, isn't it?
It is, and I can confirm you are looking older.
Yeah.
So, but it's not from the COVIDs though, is it?
No, it's not. No, I'm yet to be. I'm made of sterner stuff, as it seems.
It seems like it. Like almost everyone has, gone down, or if not that, then the flu, which seems to be so much worse, or some sort of combination of all of those, those things. But
well, in this household, we were a very snotty family for a couple. It seems to be circling for like 3 or 4 weeks, really. And but yeah, we kind of got through it. And me and Kate, we were talking about. We were saying, oh, we never get sick. We'd tell everything. Then suddenly it's like, oh, we're sick for a month. And then my little girl, then Bella had the first like vomiting bug on Monday, first time ever.
Yeah,
little thing. But we got through it. We still going strong.
That's good. That's a little bit like the cricketers, sort of the commentators' curse in cricket, when they're like, the commentators are there, they're in the final hours, and they're like, these guys just have to stay in. They just have to stay in. Oh, he's gone. You're like,
Stop pretending like you know anything about cricket.
I used to spend my entire days sitting down watching Test cricket when I was a teenager. Just loved it.
Oh, did you? What a loser.
I actually was quite lazy. Like I was quite a lazy teenager, so reading cricket really suited me.
Yeah, well, of course, like my brother-in-law is he played for the Black Caps, right? Professional cricketer. So when you know that?
I think I knew. I think I forgot that. But
yeah,
yes,
so Grant Elliott, Kate's brother, is my brother-in-law. But when I met Kate, I knew I'm English, but I didn't know anything about cricket, like nothing at all. But then I had to kind of go and watch. And back then he was playing for the Black Caps, so we were going to these games. And I'm like, whoa, I have to go and sit through these cricket games. But to be fair, when you know someone in playing, it is a little bit more exciting. So
yeah, for sure. But of course, we did not get you on to talk about cricket. I thought it would be great to chat to you.
Thank goodness. It'd be a very short conversation.
It'd be very short, yeah, and completely uninformed. So I really wanted to chat to you about a few things which I know you've had going on, that we've had conversations about, and I thought that the listeners would be interested because, to be honest, people always sort of touch base with me and ask when I'm going to get Dr. Dan Plews back on the show, because they really enjoyed.
Are you just saying that to butter me up?
Not at all.
I always feel like I'm the person you call up when you can't find anyone else.
Mate, I have podcast interviews stacked up, ready to publish. So it's certainly not a lack of content I have. So it really is. It's just finding time in your busy calendar to connect. So, look, I really want to start somewhere on a somewhat sort of controversial topic. It doesn't have to be controversial, but it's super interesting. Your carnivore approach.
Yes.
So, when you and I talked about this some months ago now, because as I understand, you're not quite there at the minute, although I might be wrong, and you can update me on that. What sort of transpired to make you think you might want to try it?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I didn't really go carnivore.
Okay.
I did the animal-based approach, which is actually very different. So carnivore is more, it's literally meat, eggs, water and salt water, basically. That's pretty much all it is. Whereas the animal-based approach is a little bit more liberal. So you can have some dairy. You can include some fruit, which also would include things like zucchini, cucumber, and pumpkin. And also you can include some honey if you want to as well. But it's all about removing. I mean, this is what I know from the guidelines, and listen to how people say you should do it. Like Paul Saladino was one of the main people who I was following. Was like removing toxic foods. So his argument is that plants are good medicines, but they're not foods that you should have readily in your diet because they contain a lot of toxins like oxalates and lectins, and like lectins in beans and stuff like that, which can affect your gut, cause inflammation of the gut, and then affect your digestion, and can then increase inflammation in some people. So and I was and the reason I did it was because I was more interested. Really, I was just seeing a lot of talk online about it, and I was like, oh, and then my friend was like, oh, I'm going to give it a go. Do you want to try it with me? And then my arm's very, very rubbery generally when it comes to stuff like that. So I was like, oh, why not? I'll give it a go. But one of the other main things about it is that because you remove a lot of the vegetables, basically, the leafy greens, you then add in organ meat. So you add in like heart, liver. You can have kidney, spleen, kidney, whatever it might be. But basically, nose-to-tail nutrition is what you have to add back in, which then will increase a lot of other nutrients as well, like carnitine, carnosine, folate. Very rich in iron. I mean, you just have to look at liver compared to kale, and it's there's not even a competition, right, in terms of the nutrient density of those particular things. So that was the thing. But I think it was always my intention to try it, and never really, and I wasn't really convinced either way. I was just kind of interested.
Well, it's interesting. So I like maybe about 18 months ago, Baz and I were like, oh, should we just give this carnivore thing a go? Let's just see. Like, let's just, 3 weeks. Literally, it was 2 days. And I'm like, I'm over this, which was really, and maybe in part because I'm not overly convinced by Saladino's argument. Like, I understand where he's coming from. And of course, the idea that plants have toxins isn't a new idea. And in fact, that's why they're beneficial to include in the diet, right? Because they've got that hormetic response that then upregulates our own anti-inflammatory and antioxidant systems. So, but of course, the dose is in the poison. So I suppose his argument is well, it sounds like his argument is no dose should be better. But there are so many phytochemicals in foods which allow our systems to work much more effectively. I've never been convinced by his argument. Not that that's not to say that it doesn't work for people, because I have clients I put on the carnivore approach because they've got the gut inflammation going on and they've got some autoimmune issues, and so it is it's like the gold standard.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely. I mean, you can't argue. I mean, you hear stories, right, of people where it's really worked amazingly. The thing is, so I started and I did some blood tests and I did a DEXA scan, and my blood test came back really good. Everything was almost perfect. Not that I'm perfect, but it was, they were I couldn't have really made them much better. They were really, really good, basically.
What about your mate? Did your mate get blood tests done?
Yeah, and he was the same. Yeah, so we were both really good, which is a bit of a pain.
You guys were both perfect specimens of the human.
Yeah, we were both specimens,
human form.
Unfortunately, and then we had the DEXA, and body fat was low, visceral fat was low, and so there wasn't much in that either. So they were, you when you're starting on a good point, I guess if you're starting with high C-reactive protein or IL-6 or some markers of inflammation, right? You're measuring those things and they're high, then there might be a better point to start. But I measured C-reactive protein, measured fasting insulin, measured resting blood glucose, measured all the cholesterols, vitamin D. And everything was really good. So
yeah.
So then I started doing the diet, and I have to say that I felt really good on it, like really good, very good. And interestingly, my heart rate variability immediately went up and stayed up.
Oh, wow.
Very much so, and evident, very noticeably, feeling very good. My energy levels were good, and I actually enjoyed it. And I was eating raw liver every day, 80 grams.
80 grams?
Yeah. It's not like a few spoonfuls, right?
Yeah,
It's not, I can't say it's something that I enjoy. I enjoyed hearts quite, they're surprisingly nice. It's just like a muscle. The heart is a muscle, right? So basically muscle meat, if you can get your head around it. And yeah, so that was good. And my training wasn't affected.
That's super interesting. Now, can we just sort of hold that point there? So you said that you included honey in your approach. So
a little bit, not much. So I didn't really go for the honey very much, but I did include more fruit.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So what sort of, and if you were to, and I'm not sure whether you have records of this, but just, food. So to how much carbohydrate would have been in your
yeah, sort of I think I would have been around 250 grams a day.
Oh, so actually fairly moderate.
Yeah, but that's quite a lot for me. Maybe a little bit more. But yeah. So I would say between 250 to 350-ish. I would say maybe. I mean, considering I really normally hover around 100 to 150 because I usually go for a low carb. I'm usually a lower carb approach, right? So, and it was good, but I'm not doing it now, obviously, and there's good reasons for that. Because one of the main things I found was I found it a little bit too restrictive. I mean, people think low carb is restrictive. It's nowhere near as restrictive as what this is and also because I was training so much and train a lot more than most people. My calorie requirement's quite high, so I get hungry. And part of my staple is I fill it with a lot of nut butters and nuts and seeds, and like I have like a like the Esfields Keto 3, which is mostly nuts, Esfields bars, which is almond. These things kind of keep me going. And I couldn't have those, so the only way to do it was then I'd have to eat fruit. And then I was just including so much fruit in my diet that then it goes, I'm like, really? Do I really want to include this much fruit in my diet? And I didn't really like that. So
yeah. Did you have a sense of what was going on with your blood sugar? Like, I don't know if you're
yeah,
still
I did.
working.
I did.
Okay, yeah.
I did, yeah. So I wore the Super Sapiens, I wore the continuous blood glucose monitor, and it was, if anything, surprisingly, I would say it was moderately more lower and a bit more stable than normal. So, yeah.
Do you think due to overall being lower in calories because you weren't able to meet your calorie requirements? Like what?
I don't know if I was not unable to meet my calorie requirements. I don't know. Maybe you could argue that it's a bit to do with the hepatic glucose output, just because maybe I'm a bit less inflamed. Maybe potentially. Who knows? Who knows? But it was because the reason I put it on because I wanted to see, but it wasn't really indifferent to what it normally was. It was more, despite me having a lot more carbohydrates. So I mean, I agree with you. Like, I don't think, and it sounds like a complete cop out when you say everything in moderation, right? And like plants, I think they have their benefits in moderation, right? Because of the if you think about hormesis and how that's how the chemicals can actually have a positive effect, but too much, anything is in the dose, right? A little bit is good, and too much can be harmful. And I do think that most people go overboard thinking that more is better when it comes to vegetables and specifically leafy greens, like doing your green smoothies and all that kind of nonsense. I think one thing that I have done is since I've come back, I don't have as many leafy greens. And I've continued to include organ meat in my diet. So I'm continuing to have liver pretty much every day. So because it's amazing, like you actually really feel like you get an energy boost when you have it. It's a very strange, like it's almost immediate.
That is not strange to me because I have the same experience, and my friend Ash down in Dunedin, and he's very much sort of in tune into sort of health and well-being and holistic stuff, and he says exactly the same thing. Like he immediately sparks up when he has liver. It's just so nutrient rich.
Yeah, and it may be something to do with the folate, the high levels of folate in the liver. Because it's the there's high in B9, which is really important for DNA, RNA, energy production, methylation. So there might be something that's almost some kind of immediate thing, because it's almost instantaneous. Like a few minutes later, you feel like you have more energy.
Now, interesting. So I've been doing some work with a company, First Light, and they're formulating, we're just looking at organ meats and things like that, and heart, unsurprisingly, is an incredibly rich source of CoQ10, and I wonder whether you get the same lift when you have heart, or is it organ meat across the board for you, or is it actually liver is the thing?
Well, I think I notice it most with liver, but I do notice it a bit with heart as well. So we just bought a beast. We had a beast that killed from the So when we just bought like all the insides and like Kate bought back this liver, literally massive.
Yeah, I've seen.
It's like a backpack. Like you'd think it was it is huge, and I was like, what the And so I mean, the thing is, organ meat is so cheap. so
Isn't
cheap.
it? Yep,
So
100%.
I was buying it from an organic. So you got to make sure it's organic, high quality, which is generally the case always in New Zealand. But anyone who's listened to this from overseas, you need to make sure it's very good. So I was getting it from this company called Moorish in New Zealand, which is based in Palmerston North, and they're an organic. And they'd send to the door, so I would just order it. They'd send to the door.
Oh, amazing.
But you could buy like an ox heart, and an ox heart is literally the size of my head, which is pretty damn big, Mikki.
Don't I know it? Don't I know it?
I thought I'd say it before you got in there. Yeah. But it's like $35, and it's like a lot of meals in there.
Yeah.
And I could even give it to the kids; they wouldn't even realize it.
It's amazing.
It's like steak. So another thing that I got into is I ordered a protein shake that you can only get from the US. So I had to send it to my friend in the US. He sent it to me, which is the whole beast, and it's got liver, pancreas, spleen in the protein shake. You wouldn't know it. And my kids, 2 and 4, they love this protein shake, and it's such a good way to get good nutrients into your kids, right?
Yeah.
I know some vegans who are watching this now think I'm an evil, probably horrible man, but it's you can easily argue against that very quickly.
Yeah.
But it's I mean, there's great ways to get organ meat in you without really, because it's not for everyone, right?
Well, it's not. And, I chat to clients about this all the time because I've got so many of them come to me and they're really low in things like iron, zinc, B12, which liver is like an excellent source of, as well as folate. And we chat about organ meat, and I get them to put it in with mince. So it's that sort of hiding. But equally, though, I think that those sort of freeze-dried organ supplements.
Yeah, they're great. They're absolutely great. Oh yeah, those homegrown primal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've bought a lot of those, so you can get like. So I was taking like it's called the Man Booster, which has testicle in there as well. I didn't really fancy eating the raw testicle, to be honest. It was kind of I was drawing the line on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, homegrown primal, like they're such a good company out of Christchurch, and Thrive 10% discount for you.
Oh, amazing! Thank you. I've got a range of them, and it's actually this is the thing with supplements. I know you and I talked a lot about supplements the first time when I had you on a podcast with me, and it was it's getting into the habit. It's kind of forming that habit. But if I go back, Dan, to the idea of vegetables and the fact that vegetables are killing us, and I just and purely just from a discussion perspective, I think it's quite interesting to chat about, because Saladino, I don't know. I just don't know that it's the vegetables that are killing us, or is it all the ultra-processed food that people are eating? I mean, how many people are really getting... I mean, we know people who will go overboard on the green leafies because we know people who are into health, into well-being, trying to do the best they can. And if you've got gut-related issues, or if you're, or predominantly sort of gut-related issues, then green leafies are probably not your friend. But, for the general population, I think it's I don't know.
Yeah, and I also think we're living in the world at the moment. If you went down the street and you said, okay, what's good for you, what's bad for you, most people think red meat is terribly bad for you.
Absolutely.
But green leafies are really good for you, which is just not true.
Yeah,
so that's what I think is the problem. So people will start avoiding organ meats and meats in general because they think it's bad, and then they go overboard on the other stuff. And I personally think that's the wrong way to do it. I think if you really want to optimize your health, you should go for the organ meats and the normal meat with some leafies and vegetables on the side.
Yeah.
So, the plant, you can talk plant vegans or even plant-based, which is not much meat. I just don't buy it. And I've never seen it work long term. I see like people go vegan and have short-term benefits. Generally, they come off a processed, crappy diet. But long term, they just end up weak and,
Yeah, in fact, one of my interviews this week I did with a woman, Sarah Tanner, who is previously vegan, has a business in and around the plant-based approach, recipe books, used to own a cafe, now sort of sells products, and she's just recently sort of been really transparent and said, hey, I'm now eating animal products because actually my health was
really suffering after 6 years on a vegan approach. So no, I completely agree with you. And to your point of what people sort of deem as healthy or unhealthy, like on the Fertilities Associate website, they had put that 1 to 2 meals of red meat a month for someone wanting to try and get pregnant because of the dangers of red meat in fertility, based on a couple of studies by Walter Willett, who we both know as a plant-based advocate, nutrition researcher. It's just crazy. Like
and as you know, they're all causational, right? Every single one of them. Every single study is just, if it proves that eating red meat is bad, and it's all causational because those people are having it, they're having red meat, but they're having it in a burger and it's crappy processed meat, and it's obvious. You've never seen an experimental controls study that proves it. Right? And that's the one you need, and it's never been done. So
and I am a massive fan of fruit and veg more than fruit. I love fruit. I love apples, but I tend to eat more veg.
Don't want a crapple though, do you?
No, far out. No, not a crapple.
I do love an apple. So the best thing that I have to say about the the animal-based approach was I started eating bananas again. I love a banana. Mate. You just can't beat a banana.
No, you really can't. So on that vein then, has your diet, have you incorporated a little bit more of fruit sort of moving forward, Dan, or have they sort of been cut out now you're back to...
No, I am still divulging in a banana every now and again, but that's because they're in the house and the kids like to eat them, so I have to. But apart from that, like I'm pretty much back to how I was before, really.
Yeah.
But with the inclusion of raw liver every day and some organ meats, because the best thing is now, I found it really hard to eat raw liver, but now I can do it quite easily. I don't enjoy it, but it doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's a very good skill to have, because how do you cook it every day? It's a pain in the backside to cook every day, and what you're going to include it in your food. So I just take it every with lunchtime, and then that's that.
Yeah.
So
nice. And for those people who are wanting to try a little bit of that stuff, then I would suggest, I like pate. I mean, most people like pate. Oh, actually, that's not true. It's probably a 50-50 split. But equally, it's fair, you could make pate out of your liver. That would be a delicious way to incorporate it, or just incorporate it with your mince. That's so easy.
Yeah, because you can make it into the mince. And, I mean, I've even known people to incorporate it into bolognese.
Yeah, delish. Yeah. That's a good way to do it.
Work quite well. Yeah, you can just make the only organ meat I can't take out. I just do not like kidney.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, it tastes like piss. Come on.
Actually, I have not had kidney lately, or maybe even at all. Actually,
it was gross. And then I tried to boil it for a bit. That was even worse.
Yeah, that doesn't sound good, actually. That just reminds me of sort of Brussels sprout memories for whatever reason.
No, it's not. It's not great. It doesn't do me any favors. I'm not a big fan.
Yeah. So, Dan, sort of moving on then. So, if you've come off sort of back to your somewhat norm, maybe with a little less veg and a little more organ meat, HRV, have you noticed any sort of shift in that? Have you gone back to your norm? Have you sort of maintained that?
So one thing about when I did the animal based is I didn't drink any alcohol, and I think that was a main contributing factor.
Okay,
and
interesting.
I haven't started again. I haven't drunk any alcohol now in 6 months or so.
Yeah.
So I actually just go for alcohol-free beers. There's a company called Freezy. Who's owned by one of my friends. Actually, he's one of the partners. He's one of Terenzo's mates as well. I just order from him, and he just brings the alcohol-free beers, and I still enjoy the alcohol-free beer. I think so. I've continued to do that, but yeah, my HRV, it did go up for that long period of time, but then it kind of did come back down, and then I got sick and it came down even more. But now it's kind of just normal again. I wouldn't say it's high; it's just kind of what it was before.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. But yeah.
So Dan, on to my next favorite topic, sodium.
Yes. You wrote a bit of a piece about this not long ago, hey?
Yeah, I did. And, much as you described sort of how red meat has been villainized, and continues to be, even though I feel like there's more, the more sort of health professionals that are out there talking about it, eating it, showing that you're not going to die because you eat it. I'd say the same is absolutely said for sodium. So I wrote a piece about it, how it's often sort of the thing that we think about with regards to hypertension, high blood pressure, but actually, unless you are salt sensitive, then sort of making changes, particularly if you are a healthy individual who doesn't have high blood pressure, then actually not getting enough salt could be more of an issue than having too much salt. So what are your thoughts?
Because did you have Rick Johnson on your podcast?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Because he, my understanding now, having listened to him, is that it's the combination of salt and fructose that's the real issue when it comes to hypertension.
Yeah.
So salt will make an acute change, but the combination of fructose and salt can make a chronic change. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. Like that often we think that it's the salt, but to your point about how people villainize red meat that comes within a white bread burger or whatever. Same could be said for salt being part of processed food that also comes along with high fructose corn syrup or sucrose that has that component of fructose that then
sports drinks.
Yeah, sports drinks that then can create like a bit of an issue. But of course, with athletes, you're an athlete, I'm a somewhat athlete. Getting the balance right with sodium, I think, is a really important point.
Yeah. It's an interesting topic because I think it's totally. I think it's people think about it too. I think athletes are too obsessed with electrolytes and sodiums.
Okay.
And sodium, and the amount of questions that I would get about how much sodium should I be taking an hour. When I'm racing or when I'm training, and I think it's. You say it's been vilified on one side, but I also think it's been overhyped from the sports setting, like massively overhyped to how important it is, because I just do not think it is. It's important, but it's not important to the fact where you have to know your individual sweat sodium levels and be taking in sodium at a specific individualized rate, So my stance is that I think, sodium should not be avoided. And when athletes that I coach and work with, you should definitely salt your foods. Be mindful of sodium. Take an the element sodium drink. Take it, have it in your sports drinks and whatnot. And it'll have some benefits. It'll help with the thirst response. And whether it's going to be, but one thing it's not going to be doing, it's not going to be stopping you getting cramp, and it's not going to be, and it might help with a bit of gastrointestinal absorption of the carbohydrates potentially, but only to certain amounts, right? It doesn't have to be a amount that's associated with your own, whether you're a salty, quote unquote salty sweater. So that's my stance. I think sweat testing is just a total bit of a waste of time.
Do you know many people who sort of do that, or you hear people in your space sort of talk about it? Because it was quite a big thing.
All the time. I know, and nearly everyone. I know so many people who have done it.
That's crazy. So talk to us about why sweat testing is actually is a waste of time, because I don't think that obviously if it's still a thing, then people are unaware of what it does or doesn't tell you.
Yeah, so there are some conditions, right, where people are salty sweaters generally, like cystic fibrosis, right? So it's not, but there is. I'm not saying there's not such thing as a salty sweater, and some people do need to pay particular attention to the amount of salt they're taking. But these are medical conditions that are few and far between and very, very rare. But the main point is that sweat rate, or the salt in your sweat, is primarily determined by how much salt you have in your diet. So if you went through like 4 weeks and you changed how much salt you're going to be eating in that week, and you took a sweat test every week, the sweat sodium content would change massively. So there's a massive between individual variation in sweat sodium, but there's also a massive within variation of sweat sodium. So it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You also have a lot of internal salt stores, and like some would say it's between 50 and 150 grams, but some would argue that there's a lot more than that. You know, you can even pull salt out of the bone if you wanted to. So that's what that's why I think it's a waste of time. And even if you could measure your sweat sodium, it changes on how much you're sweating. So that changes with what the climate is, and that changes with the intensity. It's just so varied. And then to drinking a sports drink that's matching your requirements, you're more likely and to run the risk of taking too much sodium, increasing your thirst response, and then drinking too much, and then becoming overhydrated, and then running a slow marathon.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that we have salt in our sweat is to help with the thirst response, right? We remove salt from as we sweat, and it somewhat reduces the serum osmolarity and it delays the thirst response, and that's an evolutionary advantage that is a good thing.
Yeah.
So if you take too much salt, you just get overly thirsty and you'll drink more than you need to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. So, like, that's the intra-individual variation. So the variation that I might have if I go 5 times and change, my diet on each of the day. That's one point. But of course, what you say about the conditions, like a lot of these sweat tests that, as I understand it, are done in a lab under a similar condition, which might be quite temperate or it might be quite cold. You might not have the wind. You don't have, other factors that contribute to how much you sweat. Nerves, I reckon. Like if you're nervous, you're probably going to sweat a bit more.
And a major one is duration. So if you exercise over the course of an Ironman, like your sweat rate is not the same. Your sweat rate will be much less at the back end than it is at the front end. Your sweat rate reduces over time.
Yeah.
So again, it's another thing you have to consider with that whole cascade. I mean, there's a guy called a researcher called Marty Hoffman who's done a lot in sodium, and he showed that he did a great study that was I think it was in ultra runnings, and I think it was in Tarawera Ultra here.
Yes.
And he showed that those who took more sodium ran slower.
Yeah, interesting.
Because they drank more and they didn't lose any body weight.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think when we sweat, which is quite counterintuitive, when we sweat, the salt in the blood goes up. It doesn't go down. It goes up because of the osmosis and the osmolarity of the blood versus what's coming out in the sweat, right? And another really good point is that there's been so many studies that have been done that look at serum osmolarity, so the amount of salt in your blood after different ultra endurance events. So after an Ironman, after ultra runs, after marathons, and the serum osmolarity, so the amount of sodium in your blood is the same, regardless of. It always stays the same, regardless of how much sodium you take, regardless of how long the event is, because you hold it in such a tight, regulated form. So if it's really that important and it's really varying that much, then why don't we see some differences, which we just don't? Yeah,
that's so interesting. Now, what about Kona in hot environments? And I really want to pick your brain on this because I always feel so. I feel so stumped when someone's like, so what shall I do about my sodium and electrolytes in Kona? Because I just haven't seen any great literature to say that in a really temperate environment that your sodium levels increase or your, dry for thirst increases, obviously. But what is your understanding on that, Dan?
Yeah, well, there's some really good studies actually that have looked at thermoregulatory, like core temperature and other thermoregulatory markers and sodium to see if it helps you maintain your core temperature and whatnot. And it doesn't do any of those things. So it's not going to mean you stay cooler. The only benefit, it might help you drink a little bit more.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not saying. I think you want sodium available to you, have it in your drinks and whatnot, but you don't need to increase just because it's hot. You don't need to increase it; just have it readily available.
Okay.
And then, because it's been shown that it doesn't make any difference to the thermoregulation. It makes zero difference. So it's not really. I mean, when I did Kona, people ask me all the time, like, what was your sodium? What did you do for your sodium intake during the race? And I have no clue because I didn't I couldn't even tell you. I didn't pay attention to it. I couldn't even give you any idea. I didn't even know how much was in my sports drink.
Yeah. And I have, athletes swear by the salt pills that they might take every half hour. And what I generally say to them is, hey, if that's what you normally do, then just keep doing what you normally do, because there's in part, and I don't know how you feel about this, but so much of what goes on race day is as much psychological as it is sort of, training like that. If someone's got a routine that's really worked for them, I don't necessarily love sort of switching it up for them.
Yeah, there is a bit of that, of course, but I do think the sodium will, those salt pills will just make you very, very thirsty, and then you'll end up drinking more.
Yeah,
that's what it will do.
Yeah.
So that's how your thirst response is governed, right? It's governed by that sodium salt's going in. It's going to affect your serum osmolarity, and the serum osmolarity is going to make you want to drink more water to make it back to where it should be. And then I think it's just, I think it would unrail you if you start. I know people swear by it, but I just, I remember when I did Kona in 2015, someone gave me a salt pill on the Queen K, and because I was dying 1,000 deaths, I thought I'll take anything at this point.
Yeah.
But I remember specifically taking it, and I just immediately just was so thirsty.
Oh God, yeah, yeah.
So it's funny, like I remember listening to this. Well, you because obviously sodium is associated with cramping as well, right? But people think it's associated with cramping, which it isn't. Cramping is mostly associated with muscle fatigue, doing pacing poorly, doing things like going out harder than you have, not preparing properly in the race. If you want to reduce cramping, then do proper training and make sure the training is specific towards the event. But the reason I'm telling this story is because Craig Alexander, who's 3-time Ironman world champion, he was notorious for pushing, saying how important salt was. And he tells this story of how he did an Ironman, and he ran out. I think it was Andreas Rayler, and they ran out, and he says, and we were running faster than we've ever run before, and the pace was so hard. And then he cramped in the last, coming down Palani on the last stretch just before Lee Drive, and he blamed it on forgetting to take his salt pills.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, are you sure it wasn't the fact that you ran harder than you've ever run in the first 25K?
Yeah.
This is the kind of, but it's easy to think of the easy solution, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think. Everyone's guilty of that, though. They think that it's easier for me to say to you, take salt pills, it'll sort out your cramping. It's not easy for me to say, do a 4-hour ride at your Ironman pace and make sure you run for 30K at your Ironman pace off it.
Yeah.
That's the hard way to do it, but that's the way that it will work.
Yeah.
So.
Now, Dan, you did mention that during an ultra event, your sweat rate changes and therefore your fluid requirements change. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because I don't know that that's a very well-known concept either. A lot of people think that they've got this X sort of set amount of carbohydrate and set amount of fluid that they need to hit each hour. So what do we know about how that changes?
How much it changes over time, I'm not really that sure. I don't know. I think it's very individual, but it's known that sweat rate changes over time. Anyone knows that themselves, right? Everyone, you can, I don't even have to tell people. If you think about when you're on the trainer, you sweat a lot more in that first hour than you would in the third and fourth hour. And I'm not sure, I don't know what the physiological mechanisms are behind it. I haven't really looked into it, but I'm assuming it's some sort of, you're kind of, you start sweating and then you kind of you're cool enough, or you get better at cooling yourself down. You overcompensate at the start. I'm not really sure, but I know that most people aren't aware of it. So, when people will do pre-post body weights do an hour, and it's like, again, that's another total waste of time.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
So, the fluid, even the fluids, when you do those pre-post body weights, one of the main determinants or the rate limiting facts of fluid absorption is gastrointestinal absorption.
Yeah.
Right. So, people will weigh themselves and go, I lose 1.6 liters an hour in the heat, but you can't drink 1.6 liters an hour, so you're just going to have to try and go for around 1.3.
Yeah.
And that's kind of always my guidelines to racing in the heat, like really hot conditions. Is most people between 1 and 1.3 liters. But any more than that, most people can't absorb it,
Yeah.
and you just end up peeing your pants. So,
and then is it just sort of survival in that back end of that marathon?
Yeah, well, what you need to do, what's been very shown in the literature, is very clear that starting an event in a well-hydrated state is very important for your thermoregulatory requirements, for your performance, definitely shown. So you got to think about starting the marathon as well hydrated as you possibly can be is definitely important, right? So you want to always consider that starting the marathon like you would starting it fresh. So that would mean eating on the bike, taking fluids on the bike as much as you possibly can, and then you actually want to dehydrate a little bit. So there's physiological dehydration and voluntary dehydration. So the voluntary dehydration is when you're not thirsty because you're losing sodium, like we talked about. You maintain your blood plasma volume because you have intracellular and extracellular fluid shifts. Is it 70% of your intracellular, 30% extracellular? Is that right? Of your 100? I think it's something like that.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, the bottom line, I can't remember now. But the bottom line is you can move. You have a lot of movement of water around your body to maintain your blood plasma volume, which is the most important thing. But you want to lose weight during the marathon because you actually end up running a bit quicker. And again, it's shown time and time again, running marathons is a very strong correlation between those who lose the most weight during the marathon and those who run faster. So during an Ironman, you want to try and maintain as best you can to start that marathon as well hydrated and as well topped up on carbohydrates as you possibly can. And then you want to kind of lose a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a temperate or a cold climate, it's not as important, right? Because you won't be losing as much fluid. You probably drink to thirst a little bit more. I think that would be like racing in New Zealand, type of Ironman, drink to thirst. I think that's a very good guideline. But anything hot, you need to be a little bit more cognizant on the bike specifically.
Yeah, that's a really great advice actually, because I feel like a lot of people panic about their strategy in such a long event because of course they don't want to bonk, last minute. But of course, part of that bonking could well be their fat adaptation, strategies. Earlier than in the event. But that's definitely given some people something to think about. Now, hey, slight tangent. So there was a Human OS article that came through my email talking about lactate and its ability to suppress appetite. Are you aware of that literature?
What's Human OS?
It's a great question. It is. It's sort of like a website set up by this guy. And gosh, what is his name? His name's Dan or Danny, and it sort of looks at sleep and it looks at health, and it was quite big in that sort of health space. Maybe I was much more aware of it like 4 or 5 years ago, but now there are other sort of places like Levels and Super Sapiens who sort of have trumped on the health aspect, but they do articles on health.
Okay.
So there's research, and the most recent research study was looking at rodents, and then there have been have been human trials as well, showing that a 20 to 30 second bout of activity that pushes lactate from 1 to 2 to like up to 20 can suppress appetite in that next meal when you eat around 70 minutes after that sort of exercise. So the sort of the premise of the article was, hey, can this be used as an appetite suppressing agent? And then that was obviously a rodent study, and it was done over 10 days. And across that 10 days, there was a reduction in body weight as well as leptin. No, I'm sorry, as well as ghrelin. So ghrelin is a hormone responsible for hunger. And then they looked at sort of what the human trials have found. And now the human trials haven't been long-term. They've just been acute studies. So they've been at this one point in time where they go and they make people do this hard-out session, much as I described. And then they let them go and eat whatever they like at a buffet. And those people who had done that 20 to 30 seconds ate 250 calories less at the buffet than when they weren't doing the exercise.
250 calories, that's a starter.
Well, it is a starter, but let's say that you were working with someone and they wanted to improve their body composition. And as a strategy as part, so maybe they're a hungry person, so you're working with them and they really struggle to regulate their appetite. for a range of reasons. Even if you give them all of the gold standard things to do to help make you feel satisfied and they're still not satisfied, not a bad sort of hack to add in across the week, right?
So firstly, like just from being around a lot of athletes and anecdotally, you see it all the time, right? After a very high intensity workout, people don't really feel like eating after a high lactate.
Yeah.
But I would wonder about how high it actually has to be, because I don't think 2 millimoles would be enough. Right? It
20.
has to be, yeah. 20 is crazy high. And you know what? Most people won't be able to get to 20.
That's interesting. I'd really be interested to know, because I'm pretty sure that the rate that they got these little rodents at, and maybe even the human trials, will send you the research article.
20 is a very high number for a lactate. You have to be very glycolytic, so have a very strong anaerobic energy system to get to that. I mean, you or me, no chance. Absolutely no chance of us getting anywhere near it. So
now, finally, Dan, can I ask you about your research study, which we were chatting about on text last week, that you thought I'd be interested in, and you were right?
Yeah. Actually, it was literally just accepted yesterday in SportsMed. It's been a long time coming. So this was basically, it was my PhD student Jeff Rothschild, who you've had on your show. I know that. He's a wizard, bit of a wizard. So we got more than 400 studies, and basically we looked at tried to predict a model that can predict fat oxidation during exercise, or not fat oxidation, RER, so respiratory exchange ratio, which is basically your combustion of carbs versus carbohydrates during exercise. So it was a pooled analysis that looked at, okay, what are the main drivers of either fat oxidation or carbohydrate oxidation? Mm-hmm. So typically with these models, you can, this kind of machine learning models and different types of models, you can build lots of different models to see how easily you can predict it based on a number of factors. So for example, you might have in duration of exercise, whether the person had carbohydrate during exercise, what was their muscle glycogen content, what's the fat in their diet, what's their VO2 max, what's their gender, what's their age. You put all these things into one model, and it'll be like, okay, with that, it means that their RER is 0.7, right? So 0.7 for an RER would be 100% fat. 1 on an RER is 100% carbohydrate, pretty much. Okay. So so you can put those into a model, and can you kind of predict what that's going to be? So one of the things that was interesting out of that is that with all these things that we put into the model, and we put in a lot of those things. So we put in habitual muscle glycogen content, carbohydrate during exercise, intensity of exercise, duration of exercise, gender. I will miss some of these out. Age. Habitual diet, so fat content in the diet, and I think that they were the main ones from memory, and we could predict 61% of what the RER is, which actually isn't a lot. It sounds like it's a lot, but usually with these models you can get quite a bit tighter. So that's interesting. So that means we also put in muscle fiber type, fast or slow twitch. So with all those things accounted for, you could still only account for 61% of what's happening actually during exercise. And that's not much when you consider that. So one of the things that we were brought out of the paper is that there's definitely something that we're not looking at when it comes to substrate use during exercise. There's some things that we don't really know what's having these main implications, or these main driving factors to influence your substrate use during exercise. But some of the really interesting things that came out of the paper that I thought were really interesting. Well, obviously, we know that duration of exercise is a main player in fat oxidation or fat metabolism. So the longer you exercise, the more it's going to drive up your fat oxidation. So a take-home message for any athlete who's looking to do well in ultra endurance, Kona, Ironman, you just can't get by without doing long training sessions. And that's why people know that intuitively, right? People know that you can't train for an Ironman without doing a 6-hour ride or doing a 3-hour run. Or, you just can't do it. You're not going to do it by just doing lots of 1-hour sessions and plenty of fueling, right? And then the carbohydrate that you took during the exercise, it really after an hour and a half, it did nothing to your fat metabolism. So you could take, I mean, in the early stages it did a little bit, but then after an hour and a half, it didn't really do anything. So you can take, so to keep your fat oxidation the same, you can start taking carbohydrates, an hour and a half in, wouldn't change your fat metabolism at all. So that's another interesting factor. But some of the
can I just stop you there? With that,
sorry,
then.
go on.
So sorry, I just want to know. So with that in mind, taking the carbohydrate, just so people are clear, that will help maintain performance, right, and pace and intensity because you've got that fuel coming in. Am I right?
Yeah. But depending on how hard you're going, not. I mean, if you're just going on an easy, steady ride, then probably not.
Yeah.
But if you're doing something that's a little bit more high end, closer to like, half for triathletes who are listening, like 70.3, 80% of your threshold kind of stuff, 80 to 90%, then that will definitely maintain, for sure. But again, it's all individual, right? Depends on what your fat metabolism is generally and all that kind of thing. So it would, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, go on.
And now I forgot where I was. No, but one of the main interesting factors that I thought came out of it was when it came to fat metabolism, it seemed like habitual fat in your diet was more important than low carbohydrate. So the having a lot of fat in your diet or a high fat diet was very good for your fat metabolism, more so than just low carbohydrate. So I mean, I think it's interesting, right? Because then you go, well, you can't have really high carbohydrates and high fat, otherwise you'll end up the size of a balloon, right? But we always go either high fat and low carb because we have to balance, right? But it does show that having more fat in your diets helps with your fat metabolism. And the reason being is because of, most likely because it upregulates a lot of enzymes that are important with fat metabolism. So something like CD36, for example, is an enzyme that's really important to bring fatty acids into the cell, into the muscle cell. Upregulated massively on a higher fat diet. So we actually tested this in one of my PhD students. He tested CD36, and mine specifically, someone who's got a high fat metabolism on a high fat diet, was way higher than anyone else's, like significantly higher. So that's one thing. There's other enzymes as well that are associated. So that's probably the main reason why. But then also another thing was muscle glycogen content is very important as well. So starting with a low muscle glycogen content will mean that you will then do that exercise with higher fat metabolism as well. So you think about what that means, right? So this changed my way of thinking, is that now it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be fasted to have a high fat metabolism. You could get away with doing some training the day before, having a low carbohydrate meal, waking up that morning, having some carbohydrates close to when you're exercising, which will boost your blood glucose, and it won't boost your muscle glycogen. And you could still have, I mean, that's to be proven, but that's the way I'm thinking about it. It could still promote your fat oxidation during. So,
are you just justifying that banana? Is this what you're doing?
Yeah, I can't do it though. I tell you what, that's one thing that I was really struggling with, Mikki, when I was on. I couldn't find good foods to eat before I'd exercise because I hate having carbs before I exercise. It makes me It makes me feel really whooshy. So I would my go-to. I train in the morning. I try and get all my training done first thing. So I'm done, and then I'll just work the rest of the day. So I'll stack it often. I'll swim, bike, run, boom, 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 really quick, so I can. But I'll always have a coffee. Yeah. So my go-to is I have a coffee with collagen, a tablespoon of exogenous ketones, and a S-Fuels bar. And that's done. An S-Fuels bar is only 180 grams, but it's also
you mean 180 calories?
Yeah, sorry, 180 calories. Yeah, but then I'm good to go on anything. Then I can do I might have some stuff during, like some S-Fuels train or some prime in my body.
No, that's great, Dan. So really, the sort of take homes that we know, of which only 60% is explained. So there's a whole sort of 40% that we're not really sure.
Yeah, and one other thing was slow twitch. Slow twitch. People who are more slow twitch muscle fibers would generally have lower RER, higher fat oxidation, and which is also, I mean, that's a given, right? I think we would have known that. Like slow twitch muscle fibers more oxidative, more mitochondria. Mitochondria is very important for beta oxidation and fat metabolism. So it's to be expected, really. But that's another thing that came out of it. So you and me, slow twitch monsters. Well, in
Love
fact,
it.
with your running cadence, you'll probably be doing fat metabolism for days.
I'll be out there for hours. I'm so perfectly set up for a 250 miler, right? Well, that is interesting because, you know, when you sent me the text, I was just editing another PhD's thesis, which their study showed the same thing, that it was the diet, that carbohydrate prior to exercise didn't suppress fat oxidation when the muscle glycogen content was low.
Yeah,
and
there you go. There you go. So it's really good, right? Because I think, like, for a long time now, I mean, I did quite a lot of fasted training in the past, but I don't really do it anymore. And you know, maybe I kind of intuitively knew something, but I mean, when I say fasted, I have an S-Fuels bar, which is 0 carbs and 180 calories, right? So it's not like it's much, but it's something. And even the main reason I made the shift was because Jeff and I, in his PhD studies, we did that study that looked at fat metabolism during exercise when you had carbohydrates fasted or protein, and when you had protein, there was pretty much the same as being fasted anyway. So you know, so I think it's important for athletes. It's a good way to do it. You can get, you know, and we talk, you know, think about energy availability. Now, for athletes, if you really want to think about your fat metabolism and you're not keen on going for a low carb approach, a good approach is just to have a low carbohydrate meal and then have pure protein in the morning, and then you're getting the best of both worlds because you'll get some energy from the protein, and then you can do your exercise as well. But I will say, with the caveat, is that we just don't know, and it's not really been proven if, you know, these small acute changes that we make during exercise have chronic changes long term to our fat metabolism. We don't really know, but it begs. I mean, the principles of training and the principle of specificity and the law of adaptation was it set the specific adaptation for induced demands, right? Yeah. Said principle. There has to be something in it. If you do things that upregulate your fat metabolism during training, I have to, you know, I would bet my bottom dollar that it will have long-term implications, or, you know, improve your fat metabolism.
Totally. And of course, when you improve your fat metabolism, you just go further for longer, like you're able to. You're definitely less likely to sort of bonk.
Yeah.
Well, that is awesome. And what I'll do, and I don't know that it'll be out by the time that we publish this, but if it is, I'll pop a link to the paper.
Yeah.
It
should be out because I think it's very, very close to being out. So
that is awesome.
Yeah. Great,
Dan. And so finally, anything else you want to finish up on?
I had something in my head, Mikki, and now I completely forgot what it is. Oh, this is what I was going to tell you. So one of the things that Jeff was going to do in his PhD was one of the questions we want to answer was, okay, when you what you eat just before exercise, how does that affect your training adaptation? So if you eat carbohydrates before, if you eat protein before, if you eat you're fasted before, how does that affect you long term? So the study was basically there was a 3-week training intervention, pre-time trials and some performance tests, and then you did training, and before key sessions you would either have protein or you would have carbohydrates or you would do it fasted. Then we did a post-test. Problem with COVID locked everything down, so we had not many subjects come through, but the first few subjects that completed was damning for carbohydrates before exercise.
Interesting.
Yeah, really blunted some adaptations, whereas the other two, proteins and fasted, were getting much, much better. Yeah. So interesting, eh? Like, I'm just so gutted that we never finished it. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that this is now hearsay, because it's not, because we didn't finish the study. But I think it was pointing. You know, at that time, it was pointing towards that way. But I thought that was pretty interesting as well.
And do you think, in part, because those participants coming in potentially weren't glycogen depleted?
I think there's some kind of downregulation of AMPK, potentially some downregulations of some other critical cellular markers for mitochondrial biogenesis and like upregulation of PGC1 alpha. I think that's what it is, and that's been so there have been some studies that show that lower muscle glycogen availability regulates AMPK, for example. So I think it's more along those lines that there might be something going on with some blunting adaptations which is why people do a lot. There's a lot of literature whereas the sleep low stuff, because being glycogen depleted and training in a glycogen depleted state does upregulate some of the cellular signals for training adaptation. So I think there might be something a little bit more in that than anything else.
Yeah. Oh, awesome, Dan. So for you, for the next 6 months, what can we expect?
Just going to focus on Endure IQ, getting that up and rolling. So our squad's going pretty strong. Hopefully we might launch a few new courses along the way, and
Yes.
and apart from that, just keeping on working with my pros. Really, I've got quite a good stack of pros now. So I've got Javier Gomez, Jan van Berkel, Chelsea Sodaro, Pablo De Pino, and they're all they require a lot of work. And I think my two main things that I enjoy most is my PhD students and my research and my working with my pros, and I really enjoy that stuff. So that's a lot of my focus. We've got a new PhD student starting who's looking at machine learning and athlete readiness, which is
interesting.
Yeah, a really cool one, and he's awesome. And so he's from India, and he's coming just finally. Hopefully, he's going to get into the country. So hopefully, he'll be here soon.
That sounds great, Dan. Well, we will put links to Endure IQ, to your paper, to that human OS paper, and I'll fire that through to you. Not a paper, that article on that lactate thing, to get your sort of view. That's sort of interesting. And of course, to your Instagram, which you always get some great tips.
The gram, and also with Endure IQ, our training squad. So if anyone is a triathlete and they want to join our community of endurons, as I like to call them, endure on or endure on, it's catchy, isn't it? Hey,
I love it.
So if you want to join the community, we have weekly webinars. Once a month, we have an endurance by science session where we talked about durability last week. Sometimes we'll go over racing. We talk about high intensity interval training or whatever it might be. Check it out, because we got a promo of 2 weeks for free at the moment.
Amazing. That's awesome, Dan. Thank you. Enjoy your rest of your long weekend and catch you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Mikki. Bye-bye.
So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did, and Dan is such a wealth of information, and I'm really looking forward to what he's doing over the next 6 months or so for the rest of 2022. Next week on the podcast, I have the pleasure of chatting to Dr. Stephen Cunane all about ketones and brain health. Until then, though, you can catch me over on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, and over on my website, mikkiwilliden.com, where in addition to the plans that I mentioned earlier, you can book a one-on-one consult with me. All right, team, enjoy the rest of your day. See you later.